Hi there, I'm Kansas Reflector Opinion Editor Clay Wirestone.
I'm Editor-in-Chief Sherman Smith.
Welcome to our weekly roundup and forecast of the Kansas Legislature. We finished up week 5 and we're looking ahead to week 6.
I can hardly wait.
Has the time flown by for you, Sherman?
There's been no shortage of interesting things to write about.
So let's start off with this anti-trans bathroom bill that we've talked about a couple of times before. What happened last week and what's going to be happening this week with that?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar, this is a bill the legislature cranked out right away early in the session. It started off as a bill that would ban gender marker changes on driver's licenses, and then Representative Bob Lewis from Garden City came into a meeting, unscheduled action on this bill, dropped a second piece of legislation into this that nobody knew was coming, and nobody had a chance to talk about or give testimony on. This one makes it a crime for somebody to use a bathroom that does not align with their sex assigned at birth in a public building. And there's draconian fines for the government entities if they don't enforce this properly. And if you can snitch on somebody who used the wrong bathroom, they can be fined as well. So they moved this very quickly out of the House and Senate early in the session without a chance for a public hearing. And now Governor Laura Kelly has vetoed that bill. I think we all expected that was coming. Morgan Shilson, one of our senior reporters, wrote about this during the week, where she talked to a lot of people about how this would play out if it does take effect, if it does go into law. And what she heard from local city officials, League of Municipalities, was that this will actually cost local governments millions of dollars to try to comply with. And there's a lot of confusion about how you actually enforce the provisions of this bill. There are a lot of unanswered questions, we'll put it that way. We do expect that this will come up now in the coming week, that the Senate and the House will attempt to override the veto. It passed with enough support in both chambers to override the veto. There could always be a few people who peel off, so we'll have to wait and see.
Well, and because for the reasons that you mentioned about the costs of actually complying with the bill, the League of Municipalities and some local governments have been raising some concerns about the legislation and certainly about the way in which it was passed. We'll see if that's enough to actually change any legislators' minds on the override.
Yeah, they don't care about trans people, but maybe some of the more practical problems with the bill in terms of the financial costs could weigh on them.
The other thing I would say, and this is for those of you who want to track the legislature as the week goes on, if the override vote comes up very early in the week, say on Monday or Tuesday, they have the votes, or they believe that they have the votes to do the override. If the week passes and it doesn't come up, then they're having problems wrangling the votes. Usually the way that the legislature works is they are not going to bring everybody in to do a veto override unless they're confident that they will be successful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the one caveat to that is if they're also certain that they will not be successful, they might go ahead and pull the votes, just have a vote just to put them on the record and know these are the people that we do not want back next year.
Although again, that would be something that would presumably take a few days for them to figure out.
Yeah, you would think.
So communism, not something we talk about that often on this video podcast, but communism came up this past week.
Yeah, there are legislators armed with some dubious sounding statistics from unreliable sources who think that Gen Z is full of people who love communism and don't understand what it means. And there are a number of other ideological concerns with Gen Z. So they have proposed a bill in the House, I believe, that would require schools to teach a class, high schools to teach a class about how bad communism is, and also require everybody to pass a civics test that would kind of align with the U.S. citizenship test in order to get a high school diploma.
And moving quickly from the ever-present evil of communism on to the ever-present threat of running out of water in Kansas. There was also some, I guess you could say, good news on that front of dealing with water issues in Kansas.
Yeah, I think this is a rare example where there's bipartisan support for something. Everybody understands that there's a water crisis and that the water crisis is here. I think for my entire lifetime, it feels like people have said there's a water crisis looming at some point in the not too distant future, maybe 10 years or 20 years. But there are actually communities that are struggling with this right now. And that's starting to come home for people. Governor Laura Kelly has said she wants this to be really part of her legacy. It's one thing that she wants to focus on in her final session here. And Republicans, Democrats both recognize that this is something they need to address. A couple of years ago, they were able to get the support to pass direct funding for the first time in years to support the state water plan. That bill called for the state to spend $35 million, to transfer $35 million into the state water plan every year. The legislation that they are looking at in the House now would increase that amount to $60 million every year, nearly doubling, adding $25 million per year to that investment to try to fund more grants for local initiatives. There's a task force that's grappling with kind of bigger picture issues of where do we need to focus our attention. This appears to have momentum. It's also maybe the one area of government where they are ready and eager to expand their investment and not try to cut tens of millions of dollars.
At least right now.
Yeah, for now. Yeah, it could always, get drawn back down to the 35 million per year, or who knows what number they land on.
Well, and the thing that it's important to understand about water use in Kansas, at least from the reading that I've done over the years, is that it's very well and good to invest money and to have a committee and to study things, but when it actually comes down to what kind of concrete plans you might want to put in place to actually reduce the use of water, because it's primarily agricultural users who are responsible for this, there's a lot of pushback when you come down to the actual nitty-gritty.
Yeah, we've seen this play out. One of the stories that we've been tracking out in Hayes, where the city of Hayes bought a farm with water rights in a neighboring county decades ago and has been embroiled in litigation to say, we want to be able to pump the water from that other county up to the city to use it. There's legislation now that would say this is not something cities and counties can decide on their own. They don't need to go to court. We're putting all of the authority making in the hands of unelected state officials to decide this. Irrigators out there are kind of furious at the idea that a city that's not even part of this county could be taking all of their water. And it's just kind of emblematic of the fights that are taking place as this becomes increasingly scarce. But it's everything from replacing lead pipes or old rusty pipes to the fact that reservoirs in the northeast part of Kansas are filling with silt at an alarming pace. Even the big cities in the northeast corner that don't think about water being an issue, they could be facing a crisis in the not too distant future.
So speaking of supposedly bipartisan issues, back before the session began even, there was talk about a bill that would ban the use of cell phones by students in K through 12 schools. And there was some movement on this last week, but not exactly in its original form.
Yeah, I think there was immediate heartburn over this because it applied to all schools, and private schools threw a fit about this. A lot of Republicans are willing to listen to private schools when they say, don't tell us what to do, we can manage our own affairs, but they are very eager to tell public schools what to do. But public schools have spoken out about this. Students don't like it. A lot of public schools already have this policy in place, and they just want the flexibility to do what's best for their school district. And it depends on the size of your school or the size of your district, how you handle this. What this came down to in the House committee is changing this from a total ban, telling public schools you're not allowed to have phones in your classroom anymore, to making it a recommendation. This is what we think you should do. That's where the bill stands now.
And that passed out of committee, but even the recommendation hasn't made it through both chambers yet.
Yeah, and I think there's still differences perhaps on the Senate side. They may have to get together at the end of the year and negotiate with a team from both chambers and maybe shove it into some other bill, and that's how policy gets made.
Well, that's how policy has been made in recent years in Kansas.
Yes.
And speaking of that, this in week 6 here, we're at what's called turnaround week. And as I tell people, there's the way things are supposed to go, and then there is the way things actually go. The way turnaround week is supposed to go is that each chamber has had all of its committees debate and pass out bills, and now it's the time for the both of the bodies, the House and the Senate, to examine those bills, either pass them, don't pass them, take them up, don't take them up, and then send them over to the other chamber. So the idea is in turnaround, you're turning around all the stuff that the House wants to do will eventually head over to the Senate. All the stuff the Senate wants to do eventually heads over to the House. In reality, that's what we say. That's what legislators say. But in reality, Sherman, what is it?
Yeah, anything goes. The short version of the speech is that we'll be writing more stories about floor debates this week because there won't be a lot of committee meetings. The idea is that only certain exempt committees could consider bills from now on. But in the past years, we've seen leadership just decide at random, this committee is going to meet and consider a bill anyway. And of course, some of these committees can hear bills that have come over from the other side. But the idea is they're putting a stop on new bills coming in and new bills being heard for the first time, except when they decide they want to anyway.
Well, and it's important to understand that, there is still a certain shift, right? In that, it's really kind of a free-for-all in these early weeks. There's a lot of committees. There's a lot of people in the committees who have pet issues and pet projects. There's a lot of bills that come up. We write stories about a lot of those bills, but we're moving into kind of a winnowing process, right? Where the actual stuff that comes through is gonna, you're gonna start to see the separation of the wheat from the chaff.
More or less, yeah.
Not by whether or not the bills are good, I should note, but just in terms of what leadership and the more powerful folks in the legislature want to see happen.
And it's also hard for us to know, which of these bills are things that they really want. Which of them are they trying to move through so they have bargaining chips when they get together with the other side at the end and try to work out all their final deals. There's also what are often referred to as shell bills. And the idea is that this is an insignificant bill that we're just going to pass through so that the other chamber has a bill that they can take 5 other bills and shove it into at the end. Process known as gut and go. We get to the end, they have what are called conference committees that'll get together and they'll say, we pass this bill, you pass that bill. Let's take what we want from both of these. Maybe we'll take 5 other things that nobody's ever had a hearing on and shove it all into one bill. And so, sometimes what you see getting passed now is not because it's a high priority. Sometimes it's just they want to have as many of those shells available to play with at the end.
And finally, Sherman, to sneak a question to you here that we have not spoken about in advance.
Okay.
But it's just something that I've talked about in most of these meetings, not these meetings, these wonderful videos for you, our audience. The budget continues to churn through, and there's going to be some budget votes likely this week as well.
Yeah, I think the committees are working to get those out. I think maybe both sides will have those budgets pretty set to go by the time you see this video. And then it's just a matter of when it comes up on the floor in the House and the Senate.
And then, because each chamber is making its own budget, correct, they're going to have to then come together and negotiate about what the final product actually is.
Yeah, I think we're looking at just how much they're slashing spending for higher education. That seems to be the biggest target, more so on the House side, it looks like. And it looks like primarily they're going after KU because it's in the Socialist Republic of Lawrence. The regional schools, the smaller schools, Emporia State, Fort Hays, and Pittsburgh are less impacted. KU takes the biggest hit. It looks like Wichita and Manhattan, K-State will take more modest hits as part of this.
Well, and again, even with the budget, as with all the other bills, there can be, horse trading up until the very end. And obviously universities of which, KU and K-State have their own lobbyists and will, I'm sure, be bending the ear of a lot of people in Topeka.
We'll see if they care.
And so with that, thank you for listening and for watching. Remember that you can keep up with all of these stories, as well as my delightful and insightful opinions at our website and through our newsletter, which you can subscribe to at kansasreflector.com/subscribe. If I edit the video correctly, the address should appear there on your screen. kansasreflector.com/subscribe. It's our daily newsletter roundup of all of the stories we've published during the previous day. So Sherman, thanks so much.
Thank you, Clay. Thank you all for listening.